Why do I have to be the best at everything? Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Crystal Crawford Show. I'm Crystal Crawford, and I invite you to a deep exploration of the tools of access consciousness and a totally different way of being.
Oh my God, I might die in this episode. Welcome back to the Crystal Crawford Show. We are exploring in this series the 10 keys to total freedom, but from a totally different point of view. And today we're going to jump into why the fuck we feel like we need to be the best at everything. And we can't just let ourselves get into things and explore and choose and adventure and all that stuff that everyone else is allowed to do, but not us. This is a key to freedom. If you're new here, this is Access Consciousness. I'm a facilitator. I've been doing this for 10 years. And in the last 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, 10 days, I have recommitted to myself. And what I want to have is my reality. These tools have completely changed my life. I went from being depressed and anxious and overthinking and all that other shit to this mess you see in front of you today. So you can do this. And what I used were these tools. Access consciousness is a modality that you can use to change anything in your life. And today we're going to get into why the fuck do I need to be the best? What's going on here? Who am I competing with? Just everybody. And what does it take to be able to have freedom? Because when you need to be the best, you have no freedom. You absolutely are stuck in the trap of perfectionism. Raise your energetic hand if you know what I'm talking about. So where do we want to start with this big, massive thing? This is a key to freedom. The key itself is called no competition. Don't compete. Don't do competition. Now, that's very easy to write. It's very easy to say. It's very easy. It rolls right off your lips. If you're watching live and you want to tell me where you're watching live from, I love to say hi. It's very, very different to live no competition. And I want to illustrate this key and what I learned about it in the last 3 years by telling you how much I failed at it. How much I've failed at it. And give you some tools and make this actionable, not just hope, okay? How many of you just kind of recall being that OCD little perfectionist running around for as long as you can remember? I grew up playing the piano. I am going to look over here, then you can't see it, but there's a piano right over there. I was just playing before I hopped on. My mother was a piano teacher. She was a musician, and I'm a perfectionist. And so the way she taught me to learn music was in a very perfectionist style. I took the Suzuki method, and that's a older Asian method of learning the piano, and it basically has to do with how you learn language. So you just listen over and over on repeat, and you memorize things, and you learn to play music from ear. All is great in theory and principle, but the way she had me practice the piano was really pretty brutal, actually. Every time I would make a mistake in a song, I had to go back to that part of the song and do 50 times of repetition every time. There was not a lot of flexibility in her world. And and I came in perfectionist, right? Like I came in with high standards for myself. So it sort of sets the scene. We sort of come in this way. We want excellence from ourselves. We want excellence out in the world. We want beauty. We're all a bunch of artists and creators out there in our different ways creating things. And we want this for ourselves and for the world. So, okay, cool. But then what? So what happens is we get introduced to judgment. Now, by the way, you don't come in judging yourself. You just come in with all these little idiosyncrasies about you. You're just different. But you learn judgment. I learned judgment. And so that judgment, you then take that judgment and you invert it on yourself. So that's called you expect things of yourself, you project things of yourself. And not only that, all of us to varying degrees had people around us that did that too. So we learned this really quickly, how to be destructive with ourselves. We're incredibly aware, we're incredibly sensitive, we're incredibly capable, you're incredibly creative. You have all this amazing shit going for you. And you've learned how to judge. And you don't know that that's what you're doing. You just think that's the way to be. So all of that perfect storm gets inverted on ourselves and we start to compete. Okay? I have been joking that in the last year or two, I've gotten way more freedom with this key to freedom. When I first learned about this key, so I learned about this key like 10 years ago. And they're like, one of the keys to freedom is no competition. And I was like, ugh, I don't do that. And I didn't even revisit for like 5 years. I'm like, that's not my thing. I read the chapter 5 years in, and it is my only thing. This is the thing that I do. And so I want to give you some pieces from the book to give you some meat to chew on, to see if this might be your thing too. This is the thing you're doing to yourself. And then we're going to make it actionable of how you can contribute to yourself rather than beat yourself up constantly. Anybody interested in having a little freedom? By the way, I have a new class starting tomorrow. It is called Living Without Judging Yourself. You can find the link in my bio. You can find the link down below. Let's go. Let's get started. Look, here's the elements of competition. Anybody interested in just like a little education on this shit? Okay. Right, wrong, good, and bad. If there was no right and there was no wrong, and there was no good and there was no bad, and a tree fell in the forest, would you hear it? Like, if there was none of those elements, would there be anything for you to judge yourself against? But since we live in a reality that teaches us actively that there is a right and there is a wrong and there is a good and there is a bad, and that person's good and that person's bad, and that person's beautiful and that person's ugly, we then learn this reality and we start using it against ourselves. So those are the elements of competition. If there was no right and no wrong and no good and no bad, you wouldn't have competition. But guess what? That's not the reality we're living in. So for me to have a different reality than what I'm living in, because you can live in this reality and have a totally different one. You don't have to function from right and wrong and good and bad. But guess what you're going to have to be willing to do? You got to give that up and strengthen massive allowance for yourself. Because most of us are walking around, and you can raise your hand and holler me too and throw me an emoji if you're walking around the planet pretty sure that there's something wrong with you. And some of us have walked around the planet for years. I'm 48 this year. Not just pretty sure that there is something wrong with me, but certain. And that's changed so much over the 10 years that I've used these tools, but here I am still talking about it. So this came to a head for me in my Latin American years, as we're going to call them, my Latin American era, last 3 years. Moved to Panama. Very excited. Was hit with this rush and this wall of this culture and energy. Okay, Panama is beautiful, by the way. The earth down there is beautiful. Latin American culture is very intense. I think every culture, when you're not from there, has its shock, okay? I had the same shock, actually, when I moved to the southern United States from Colorado, just so you know. So moving to a new country is shocking to your system. The culture itself, though, is a very competitive culture, just so you know and have that information. It's very competitive. If you talk to anybody who's gotten out of Latin America and speaks a lot of English, they talk about it. So when I first got there, I basically essentially forgot all my tools, forgot that I was aware, forgot that I was super psychic, and started picking up on all this stuff and felt more insane than I ever had. Partnered to that, okay, so there was all this stuff going on, whoosh. Partner to that, I came there with built-in insecurities. Now, what is an insecurity really? An insecurity is an area of your life where you're sure you're wrong and bad, but you're covering it up so that no one will see it, so that you can prove that you're not. That's what an insecurity is. So people who are insecure, if you get right underneath it, they're very reactive. Anybody ever been around an insecure person? Anybody been one? So insecure people are very reactive. They're very trigger sensitive. They're reactive. Why are they reacting? Why would a person react about all this stuff? Because they're busy holding down and holding out of sight what they really believe about themselves. So that was me, which I didn't know to the degree I was doing that. So you put someone who's been hiding their insecurities from themselves into a situation where they have no comfort zone whatsoever. I became a roaring reactive mess. Okay. The third factor was that we moved into an area that had a lot of very, very beautiful women. Now, There's so many things there. But what showed up for me was I started trying to be the best, realizing at the same time that I wasn't. I wasn't the most beautiful. I wasn't the youngest. I wasn't the thinnest. I wasn't the most stylish. I had come out of London, Ontario, which is this very middle of the road town where there is none of those energies, into a very competitive part of Panama. And that's where actually all the Latin American models come, and they get all their jobs, and they stay in this really beautiful condo building. So there was all this stuff going on that I didn't really know about. I tell you that to tell you that because all of that was occurring at exactly the same time, and I was very unconscious about how much I did not like myself, it created the perfect storm. I stormed. All right. Now, there are things on the other side, absolutely, but I'm going to tell you my side. And I spent the next 2 years trying to be good enough. What happens when an infinite being who is already good, who can't even be good enough, like where that's not a thing? If you're an infinite being, good enough isn't even a conversation. What happens when an infinite being tries to be something they already are? That's a real twist. Because you're trying to be the thing that you are, so you're not acknowledging what you are, you're negating what you are, you're trying to do something that you can only be. And that whole time, you're trying to get what you think you lack from outside of yourself. And that right there is competition. If you've ever run into somebody who's a very competitive person, at the very base of it, they believe they lack what they're trying to get. And none of it's true. This is the thing about competition and why it is such a lockup. Because when you need to be right, when you need to be the best, when you need to prove that you are good enough, when you need to not try new things unless you know how to do it, right? You're not going to embarrass yourself. When you get embarrassed easily or pissed off when somebody reveals your hidden cards, all of that is competition. But the root of competition is knowing that you are not enough. Why would you need to be right if you were okay? You wouldn't. You only need to be right to prove that you're okay, which means you don't believe that you're okay. So Dane puts it like this. He says, anytime you need to be right or anytime you need to win and not lose. Anybody ever been in an argument where you had to win and not lose? Not me. I'm perfect. I've never done that. Only all the time, 24/7. I mean, it's just recently in the last 6 to 8 months that I've been able to change it. Anytime you want to be right and you're trying to be right, you are trying to win and not lose. And that's competition. So the only reason that that's relevant to be able to identify it is that it locks you up. How many of you guys have gone after trying to be right? Like, and you know, how many of you know you're right? You just know you're right. And have found hills that you're willing to die on. Right? I'm going to die on this hill because I'm right about this and I'm not letting this go. Anybody ever done that? Maybe that's just me. I'm aggressive. So if I believe that I'm right, I'm going to be aggressively right. If I believe that I'm bad, I'm going to be aggressively fighting that reality because I don't want to live feeling bad, but I deeply believe it. So everything about what I do is going to be aggressive. I don't know about you. So that's competition. So that renders me trapped. Number one. Number two, if I am determined to be right in a relationship, that renders us at a standstill. They can't go anywhere. If I need to be right and you need to be right, then we're really at a standstill. Then one of us has to die. In that situation, one of us has to lose and one of us has to die. And so both Andres and I brought into this mix of our relationship these hidden from ourselves places where we both believed we weren't enough and became two of the most competitive people on the planet while desperately wanting not to be that. And we've talked about it since then, since we've come back into this country and really allowed ourselves the soothing of this culture. There's been so much healing and so much recovery of our true nature and so much wisdom gained through that period of trial. Trial by different country fire, you know? So I want to also like say that there's a way out. But this is one of the most intense energies that you can choose with yourself and with other people. And if you stay in it, it destroys everything. This will destroy your relationships. This will destroy your body. This will destroy your business. This destroys faster than almost any of the other keys. So I want to, let's run a little process here for all of us since we're just in that energy. And if you guys come to the class, we're going to really dive into these, okay? And you can ask questions. I don't know if I have a process. All right, let's just segue. When I was facing this whole, I learned that I was competitive through fucking up. And I say fucking up with tongue in cheek at this point, right? Like I learned through living it. And I learned through experiencing the effects of it. So for me, competition showed up in this survival, coping, clinging on to the last shred of self-pride that I had. It was so intense. I was having such a hard time. But all of my stuff came up at exactly the same time as I was aware of everybody else's stuff. It was so intense. So there I am, and I'm reacting to all of it, and I don't yet have the keys to clear out the need of reactive reality, which we have now. And one of the things Andres kept saying was, I don't know why you keep making yourself less than. I would go into these massive things. I was all upset, basket case. He's like, I don't know why you keep making yourself less than. There's nobody that's like you. And I think my face looked like this. I was like, fuck off. Like, this is not about that. Now, usually the thing that you don't want to hear is the thing that you're doing, by the way. So it's not about me being less than. It's like, this is about what you're doing, and I'm pissed about it. And if you wouldn't do this thing, then I wouldn't have this thing, and this is about you. And so when he kept bringing up that less than thing, it didn't hit until it did. It was like a year later, I was really like going, what is it going to take for me to be the person that I know that I am? I'm living in reaction. And I got to the base of it, and right at the base of it, sure enough, there was the belief. I'm not good enough. So I use the tools. So here's some of the tools that you can use if you're very conscious that you're living with the belief that you're not good enough. I wasn't for a long time, but if you're conscious of it, you can go like this. All the presumptive reality holding this belief in place. I destroy and uncreate it all. Right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys, povids, and beyonds. All the presumptive reality holding this belief in place. I destroy and uncreate it all. Right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys, povids, and beyonds. Okay, so that's your first tool. And then what you want to do is go all the need of reactive reality that I'm using to prove the presumption correct. I destroy and uncreate all of that. Right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys, povids, and beyonds. And that's the clearing statement. You can go to clearingwithcrystal.com and get a whole video on that. So you want to start to work with the belief underneath and not the thing on the top. Now, here's the thing. All relationship problems come out of competition. So if you're in a lot of relationship difficulty right now, it's because one or the other of you needs to be right. That's all relationship difficulty. So the way out of difficulty is to recognize first what it is. Most relationship difficulty is attributed to you're with the wrong person. So if I was with the right person, then I wouldn't have this difficulty. For example, with me, if I was in the right mix of people, then I wouldn't feel this way. If you weren't doing this thing, then I wouldn't feel this way. So we usually attribute our difficulty to the thing on the outside of us. But the truth is that all of life can come to us with ease and joy and glory. That is a reality that's available. It exists as a reality we can choose. So if all of life really can come to me with ease and joy and glory, and it's not, and it's not, then that either means that reality of ease, joy, and glory is not real and not choosable and not possible, or I don't want to choose it. I want to be right, and I'd rather be competitive and trapped than free. Also a freeing realization. So to do no competition, you got to be willing to really lose your rightness, which most of us are not willing to lose, by the way. And you got to be willing to lose your wrongness, which I think we're even more addicted to. So let's run another clearing just for fun. What addiction to rightness and wrongness are you using to maintain the competition with you? Are you choosing? And everything that is times a godzillion when you destroy it and create it all. Right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all night, shorts, boys, povits, and beyonds. So you can take those processes, by the way, and you can start really running them. And what I mean by running them is put them on a device that repeats them, loops them. And you can get some more freedom with that. I had to do a lot of clearing on this stuff before I could, like, be functional. I was so unconscious about all this stuff. So here's another thing Gary says about this. I'm hoping that this key will get you to stop competing with yourself by making yourself less than in order to compete with others. I need to read that again. I'm hoping that this will get you to stop competing with yourself by making yourself less than in order to compete with others. Anybody ever made somebody else greater than them? I have people do that with me a lot. They're like, I just kept comparing myself to you. Oof, that's rough because, like, you can't do that with me. I'm like OCC. I'm an obsessive compulsive, like, expeller of content. Like, if you compare yourself to me, I don't know anybody else that does as much content, and I just do it. It's just natural to me. So you can't do that as you. You have to find the way that works for you. But that's what we do. We take somebody that we admire and then we start to compare ourselves to them and make ourselves less. The moment you compare yourself to someone else, you're the bad one. You're the wrong one. You're the lazy one. You're the shitty one. You notice that? You don't ever compare yourself and go, well, sometimes I guess we compare ourselves to someone else going, I guess I'm doing pretty good, right? But we use other people to obtain information as a reference point for, like, how good we're doing but usually how bad we're doing. And that's what a lot of social media has created for a lot of people. Is they go on social media and guess what? They don't feel better about themselves. They feel worse about themselves. Is that social media's fault? Or is that what we've been taught, the competitiveness that we brought in with ourselves being used and inverted against ourselves? So there is such a thing as generative competition because the only person you can compete with is yourself. That's generative. Then there's really such a thing as degenerative competition. So degenerative competition is comparing yourself to anybody else and finding yourself lacking. That's where you're going to kill yourself. You just stop showing up. Anybody ever not created because they looked out in the world and saw what other people were doing and was like, I'm never going to be able to do that? There's no possible, so I'll just quit now. That's because you're competitive. And if you can't be the best, you don't want to do it. So here's my big antidote for that kind of stuff, because there's a couple of different things we're kind of blurring together in this conversation. One of them is relationship stuff, and another one is like creation stuff. When you stop yourself, because if you're not the best, you're not going to do it, go, what would it take to be willing to do this wrong and do it anyway? In that moment, you are giving yourself the freedom to be bad. Just be bad. And then you'll be willing to create, because as long as you know that it's going to be bad, and we all know that it's going to be bad, then you're going to be fine, right? But as soon as you have to get it right, paralyzation. See, this is what we were talking about at the beginning of the chapter, which is the elements of competition are right and wrong and good and bad. Anybody ever lock themselves up with that? Never me. I never did that. So then the creation part is just what if you were willing to do it wrong? Go out and do 30 bad videos. Don't even try to get them right. In fact, do them the worst you can possibly do. The truth is that your worst is better than 99% of other people's stuff because you're that good. But you won't see yourself that way. So you got to be willing to do it bad from your point of view. But then there's this other thing of relationships with other people. And that too requires that you're willing to be wrong. For me, that's been the harder one. Because if I'm wrong, then I die, right? Like if I'm wrong, then I'm bad. It has become very meaningful. I've made that very significant, to be wrong with another person. But that's the key to all relationship thrival, is when both people come in with that vulnerability of going, I'm probably wrong about this, but blah, 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 right? That energy that's very gentle, that's very nurturing, that's very like in allowance of what you want and want to have, and in allowance of the other person. And, you know, there's a wisdom and a maturity in that that recognizes that there's two people here, not just me. And there's something to be created. That's a very different space for relationships than you did this thing and now I'm going to kill you for it, which I have lived there. I saw my mom live there. That destroyed their marriage. That was destroying my relationship. So here's another little piece of this. If you see you as a contribution, that gentleness comes from, I know I'm a gift and I know you're a gift. Okay? If you see you as a contribution, most other people can't help but see you as a contribution as well. But if they don't see themselves as a contribution, if you're with somebody that doesn't see themselves as a gift, they may see you as competition. And this is something Andres and I've really workshopped over these last 4 years. We've made so much progress, where each of us had this area where we were convinced that the other person was better. For him and me, like him looking at me, it was making money and like having a business and engaging online. Like that's really been easy for me. I've been developing it for years. He would compare himself and be so pissed and want to compete. But it's very unconscious. We didn't have conversations about it. For me, it was this other thing of like, his family is so stylish and all about physical wellness and all this stuff. And I would compare myself to that and find myself lacking. So we each had these very, very different but similarly competitive elements in our world. We both wanted to be the best at everything all the time, based on what we decided the best even was. Right? You have to judge. And I haven't really mentioned this throughout this episode, but it takes so much judgment to do all of this. You have to judge yourself nonstop to do this. And so we had created this like judgment soup. When you're in a situation where you think somebody doesn't see the contribution that you are, it's because you have that point of view about yourself. Anybody ever been around somebody where they're like, oh, they don't see the gift that I am? So you're looking to them to see that you're a gift because you don't see it. And if they don't see it, then you get to be pissed at them instead of looking back at you going, I'm the one that doesn't think I'm a gift. If you know you're a contribution, anybody, other people can have any point of view they want. And it doesn't affect you because you know you're a gift. It's like not even relevant at that point. So here's how you make this actionable for yourself. You want to start paying attention. Presence is everything in changing where you function from. Get present. Start paying attention. Where are you doing this? You know, are you keeping yourself out of the ring? Whatever ring that is, you know, the creation ring, the creating your business ring, the life ring. Are you keeping yourself out of the ring because of whatever? Are you in the ring beating everybody up and using force to try to get what you want because you've decided you're right about it? Are you creating difficulty in your relationship because you need to be right? Just pay attention. Where is this coming up? How are you competing that you're not looking at? And what would it take? What would it take to walk around knowing that you're a gift just as you are? And I don't mean that as a fucking cliche or a set of affirmations. I mean that as a reality. And I'm not saying you're going to get that today or tomorrow or even 10 years from now. I think after 10 years of working with these tools, I'm only just getting it. But I did start asking the universe to show me 6 years ago, very distinctly. I was like, universe, show me the gift of me. Oh, it's been a ride. You could ask for that. You are a gift. And the moment you start to know it and choose it and function from it is the moment your whole life changes. So, where can you begin? And what would it be like to live without judging you? To live as the fucking gift that you are. That you knew that once upon a time you knew. You walked around the house and you strutted your stuff and you like showed people your drawings and you put your stuff on refrigerators. You knew that. And then you just forgot. You gave it up. You can reclaim it. So join me in the class. Share this with a friend. Like and subscribe so you can have more. Buy this book, The 10 Keys to Total Freedom. You got so many choices. Use the tools. Create the reality that's going to work for you. And I'll see you in the next conversation.